Hey everyone, Duke Nugget 3D here with another mask to review in my collection, and this is another mask which I had gotten off of Hype recently and came with the PMK3 that I reviewed in my last video. And today we're going to be talking about the Russian MAG-3L civilian defense mask, or that's what it's referred to. I'm not sure if these are actually used for civilian defense, but before I ramble on about that, there have been a lot of sort of generic Russian panoramic masks entering the market these days through various companies, such as Breeze, JSC Sorbent, Enix, etc. And the MAG series masks were made by JSC Sorbent, probably beginning sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s, more than likely early 2000s at the very least. And as far as I know, there's been rumors saying that these were intended for export. I'm not sure if that's entirely true. It seems like it would be the case, but nevertheless, they were commercially available in Russia and throughout most of the European Union, and to a degree the United States through eBay and other sources. There are several various models of the MAG series respirators. The first obviously being the MAG-1, or simply the MAG, which will have a 40mm port on the central valve assembly here. The MAG-3, which will have 40mm ports on either side. The MAG-3L, which is this model, which will only have a 40mm port on one side, as opposed to having the option to switch the canister. And presumably there would also be a MAG-3R, which would indicate the canister on the right side. And then there is the MAG-4, which is essentially just a MAG-1, but made entirely out of silicone. Although this definitely feels like silicone. I'm not entirely sure what material it is. Probably, maybe some sort of butyl. I'm not entirely sure. It feels more like silicone to me, but nevertheless, it's the catalogs describe it as a different type of rubber and not silicone. Visually, the masks appear to be somewhat loosely based on the 3M 6800 series respirators, but with a few major differences in the arrangement of the harness, the hardware, etc. And that's really not all that much of a based claim, saying that they're based on the 6800 series, because really the only similarity they share is the shape and arrangement of the panoramic visor that comprises a good 60 to 75%, if not more, of the facepiece, whereas the actual face seal is a separate external part which is clamped around the lens. A very unique concept that you see a lot in most modern industrial and panoramic masks, but anyhow, there really isn't too much else to say about these. These are, as far as I know, designed for industrial and CBRN purposes. They claim that these use a variety of canisters and can be used for a variety of purposes. However, the most attributed description I see for this mask is as a civil defense mask. As weird as that is, you don't really see a mask like this and think it's civil defense. It seems more like a modern industrial mask, but what have you, I'm just going off of what the company claims it is. So, nevertheless, let's get right down to the kit. The canister is probably not the canister that would come with this mask. This is just the canister that came with my PMK3 with the bayonet to 40mm GOST adapter. Outwardly looking at the mask, it is made out of a pretty decent polycarbonate material. Mine is fairly used and dinged up, so it is a bit scuffed, unfortunately. You have this weird metal plate on the top of the upper lens clamp. I'm not entirely sure what that would have been for. Probably had a label of some sort on there, but I'm not entirely sure. You have a PMK style outlet valve, which, interestingly and amusingly enough, the entire assembly can be unscrewed from the mask. Not just this secondary outlet valve, but the main one as well can be unscrewed from this assembly, whereas with the PMK series and the GP7s, etc., these would be basically clamped onto the rubber, whereas this, obviously, as you just saw, can be unscrewed. Also, a weird thing I noticed is that the first outlet valve is the typical Russian sort of beige flesh-colored rubber, whereas the outer one with the valve shroud is actually clear silicone. So that's very interesting, that how there's two different rubbers involved in making these valves. The outlet valve and voice diaphragm assembly can unscrew. This black plastic frame here unscrews, and then the entire valve housing pops out from the inside. And presumably the inlet valve would as well, but I've tried many times. I cannot get those threads to loosen. I even have specialty tools which correspond with the holes that would allow you to unscrew this valve, but I could not get it to budge no matter what I tried, and I didn't want to try too hard and risk breaking the faceplate, etc. The outlet valve and voice diaphragm are protected by this sort of plastic mesh material, which is hot glued onto the internal assembly here. It doesn't seem like the greatest choice of adhering it, but it holds well enough for what it needs to. Screwing the valve back on. Getting a good look of the lens frame, you can see that it is two separate plastic clamps which are retained together with a single flathead bolt and a nut on each side. There really isn't too much else to see externally. It does use a 5-point harness, which does use a similar buckle system to Chinese, Israeli, and some German masks. However, it's really hard to screw up this harness design, but somehow the Russians made this design to be the stiffest and most awkward buckle system to adjust. Russians and head harnesses just don't seem to mix for whatever reason, but I mean, it works well enough for what it needs to, but I just find it very difficult to pull the straps and adjust it as opposed to any Chinese, German, or Israeli mask that uses this same buckle setup. And then the harness is nothing to write home about, just a simple 5-point rubber harness with a hole in the back, presumably for ventilation or some other purpose. Not as bad as the PMK harnesses, mind you, but still just a rubber harness. And I will show off the interior of the mask, where there are some markings to be seen, believe it or not. And there is one major fatal flaw to this mask that I have noticed in its construction. If you give me one moment here, again, this harness is very finicky to adjust. I will reverse it as best as I can for the video. Alright, so looking on the internals of the mask, the first thing that I noticed is this, the chin cup. It is a rather piss-poor rendition of a chin cup because not only is the internal peripheral seals blocky as hell, but the chin cup does not even line up with the nose cup at all. It sort of sits halfway up against it, and it just doesn't work that well. Granted, it isn't too much of an impediment, and it does actually fit fairly comfortably, but it's just very awkward to look at, and it just doesn't seem like it's meant for this mask, to be honest with you. Throughout the inside, you can see that how crude the plastic valve assembly is. You can look straight down to the outlet valve throughout the top there, and then you have the small voice membrane, which presumably would be the same as like a PMG or a PBF, because it seems about the same size and diameter, which is retained with this this plastic screw guard assembly, which I'm not going to remove and will not attempt to remove. The nose cup is a bit chunky looking. It is very crude with lots of flashes around the edges. It's not the most comfortable nose cup, but it's not the most uncomfortable either, so it does what it needs to. And it uses the same valves, presumably, as the PBF mask, or it looks like it uses the same valves as the PBF. I could be wrong. And also neat about this mask is the Russians tried to get on the bandwagon of a double seal to try and make a universally sized mask to not have to make several different sizes to fit various different facial sizes. What they did was they had an outer large seal for medium to large faces, and they had a smaller inner seal for medium to small faces. And this works reasonably well, but if you're a large or medium, this small inner seal can get in the way, and these corners here actually press right up against your eye sockets. They go right into the corners of your eyes, and it is a bit awkward to wear, but it's not uncomfortable at the very least. So markings, there are very few. On the top here we have a 13 indicating this face piece was made in 2013, and the 3 dots indicate that it was the 3rd quarter of the year. There is a similar marking on the internal of the head harness somewhere. Here we go. There is a 13 with 3 dots indicating the 3rd quarter of the year, and there's also a TM here. I would assume that would mean Tambov mash, but that doesn't seem right. So, because I know these masks were made by JSC Sorbent, so that it can't be a Tambov mash stamp, could it? Feel free to let me know, but I don't know what that TM stamp means entirely, because there doesn't actually seem to be any. Actually, there is one other stamp. It's the sticker on the bottom of the lens just below here, indicating mask MAG-3L, or yeah, 3L, and then there's a bunch of GOST rating stamps and logos and all that sort of stuff. So I actually don't know what the MAG stands for. If someone knows what MAG stands for, feel free to clue me in, because usually with Russian designations, the names are an acronym which stand for something. So again, feel free to clue me in on what that means. And that's really all I have to say about the design. It's an okay design, especially if it's intended as an export mask, which is what I've heard that this is, but I could be very wrong on that. Could just be a rumor. But that's basically it. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, or concerns, drop them down in the comments below. I'm Duke Nougat 3D, and I'll see you all later.